So hi, this is Jason Tuschman. Welcome back to Playing Offense on Practice Management. Today I've got with me Eric Wilson. Eric Wilson's a longtime partner and friend. I've known him for almost 6 or 7 years now. Eric has been involved in the business of practice management as an owner. Eric ran almost a $3.5 million revenue a year plastic surgery practice out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And also today coaches a lot of the leading plastic surgeons today on how to run their business better with respect to practice management, sales operations, and marketing. So, Eric, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
So, Eric, here we are. It's March 30th. COVID-19, 2020 is reaping havoc on the medical industry as a whole, reaping havoc on a lot of our clients. How would you, when you look at the business today and what's happening, if you had to take a step back and look at the background that you have and talk a little bit about the practice you had as if you were an owner today, could you talk about kind of what you had, the operations, the people, the personnel, and how you would be handling things if you were a business owner today? And then we can get into the coaching perspective in a couple minutes.
Sure. Well, I mean, the operation that we had was, in the beginning, was a single surgeon practice, and then the last couple of years transitioned into 2 surgeons. We had an accredited ASC facility, so it was 100% cosmetic. So we were doing everything in-house, but we had a pretty good-sized staff between full-time employees, part-time employees. We did a lot of overnight stays. Our payroll was close to 25 people, which for a private practice, if you're not a big group practice, is a decent amount of payroll overhead. And then obviously operating the surgery center was fairly expensive as well. So, I mean, if I were in this situation today, and obviously I really am looking at the situation from that vantage point when I work with my clients, because the majority of my clients are single surgeon private practices that are focusing almost exclusively on aesthetics. I do have a couple of clients that are bigger group practices that have a significant insurance base, 30 to 40%. So they have different challenges, but also different market opportunities. But right now, if I were looking at this, I would really be looking at it from an immediate 30-day perspective, 60 days in terms of, because those things are completely different in terms of what's going to be happening in those timelines, and then also 6 months from now, what's going to be happening. And planning for basically each one of those in its own little separate sandbox in terms of what your strategy should be.
So if you were the business owner today, the practice owner as you were a few years ago, what would be the first thing you would have done when this started to break a week ago?
Well, so when this started to break, one of the first things that I would have done that I advised all my clients to do was immediately, I started talking to them about pipeline, and that includes what do you have in the pipeline right now? Because the biggest concern in the beginning for me was patients potentially making a run on refunds, wanting to cancel surgeries, being afraid of this whole thing. And not only does the acquisition part start to slow down, but the fear of patients wanting money back. Interestingly enough, we didn't see a whole lot of that. Now, I will tell you that all of my clients were proactive based on my conversations with them. And the first thing we did was reach out to every patient on the surgical schedule. The ones in the next 3 weeks were the priority. But then as soon as we got done with those, we moved further out, and we made sure that they understood we were going to be communicating with them regularly on timeline, that they would be a priority to get back on the schedule as soon as we were able to open the calendar again, and just reassuring them about things.
What's an example of that message, Eric? What's an example of that message? So if I'm a doctor and I've got a breast aug scheduled for 2 weeks from now, I've gotten 50% of their deposit up front. How are you training the teams to deliver that message in a way that makes the consumer feel comfortable, keeps the practice in good standing with that patient? What type of message specifically are you telling them to give?
Sure. Well, just to realize too, as of today's date, things have changed so much from where they were just 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago, we were being told, hey, this is the 15 days, slow the curve. We all kind of had the feeling it was probably going to be more than 15 days, but I think the majority of us were feeling like, okay, we'll probably be able to get back to business by middle of April, at least hopefully. So the immediate message was calling people and letting them know, like let's say you're talking about that alleviate any concerns about the procedure itself, because people are kind of, am I going to be able to get my procedure? Is this something that's going to get pushed out for 3 months? Those kinds of things. In general, what we've found is that the majority of people have made these deposits. The money is something that they had already planned for. And at that time, they were concerned about time off as much as they were concerned about anything. So they really wanted to be able to get back on the calendar as soon as possible. So the initial conversation was, you are the first priority. As soon as we get the calendar back open, we're going to give you all the dates that are available, and we're going to let you get back on at first priority in terms of your choice. And obviously, we will continue to communicate with you. The practices that I've seen start to run into a little bit of issue were the ones who kind of didn't move on that, didn't communicate with people in the first week. Yep. Those are the ones that were getting phone calls of patients being scared, not really knowing, how to handle the situation. But I think more than anything, it was reassuring the patient, letting the patient know they're a priority, and letting the patient know that the minute the calendar opens up, they're going to be our first priority to get back into the office.
Yeah, definitely. If you're reaching out in these types of times first, it's much better than being, hearing from the customer. So.
Yeah, you really have to be proactive with your communication right now.
So when you think about things that are happening, and you talk about the change between last week and this week, when you talk to your clients today, how are you telling them to prioritize their time versus perhaps what they were doing 2 weeks ago or even last week?
Right. Well, I would say right now, the biggest thing is looking at you're kind of comparing two different things, general business strategy and then managing your practice right now. So the overall business strategy is how do I take some of these new initiatives that have just gotten passed and make sure I put those in the right timeline so that I'm leveraging the potential funding opportunities by the government as opposed to burning it right now. And then in addition to that, am I doing the right things for my business? So one of the things that I've seen practices be reticent to do is to put people on furlough or to potentially do some part-time layoffs. And I think they've, for a good reason, and they've been trying to do it for the right reason. I want to keep my people on payroll. I want to make sure they keep getting paid. But to a certain extent, that's going to stress your business now, right? So 2 weeks ago made sense because we were thinking, okay, this might be a 2 to 4 week deal. I'm going to try to take care of my people. Right now, what you're looking at is potentially, if you look at the beginning to the end, being with our offices closed for close to 2 months, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the emergency unemployment payments that they put on top of existing unemployment, you're looking at most people getting a paycheck of close to $1,000 every week. So a lot of our hourly employees right now could be making as much
or more,
close to as much money or more on the unemployment system. If you furlough them, you can still keep them and pay them their benefits from your practice. But from the practice standpoint, I think you have to be looking at how do I manage my short-term overhead, which is right now, versus what am I going to do 60 days from now? And so you've got to, if you burn through all your cash right now trying to keep people on payroll when you're not open, then you're going to be in a much worse position, 45 to 60 days from now. So that's one of the biggest things I'm talking to my clients about is managing, keeping the people on that have to be there to do what you need to do right now. But then the people that you don't really need right now, significantly scaling back your workforce, letting them file for unemployment on the furlough system, keep their benefits, and then let them know, hey, the minute we can get back open, we're bringing you right back in. And at that point, you're going to tap into the Paycheck Protection Program.
So tell me, let's switch gears a little bit off of personnel. And I mean, look, everybody's heard it 100 times in the last week, that cash is king, and you've got to make those tough decisions to come out on the other side of this. Talk about your thoughts on the patient acquisition process. So we talked about how to keep in control and keep comfortable the people that have already booked surgery. How are you talking to your doctors about the next 30 to 45 days, and whether it be the use of virtual consultations, the use of certain types of pricing strategies? What are the things you're talking to them about to enhance the patient acquisition process, given the challenges that we all know are in front of us?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the first thing. Is just like you said, is having a realistic expectation of what that looks like right now. But at the same time, understanding we do want to take advantage or at least capture whatever opportunity is out there. So The majority of my clients were already doing virtual consultations prior to this, just because if you're an aesthetic practice, that's something you want to offer. So luckily for them, the transition into that wasn't something that was difficult. I did have two clients that we kind of had been hesitant to do that are now doing it. So I think you kind of have to combine the virtual consultation with some pretty aggressive pricing strategies. One of the things that we've done is most practices that I work with are hesitant and have not taken significant deposits for surgery in the past. I've always been a big proponent of 30 to 50% deposits on surgery, because a lot of my clients kind of are in that old mindset of taking $1,500 to $2,000 down, sometimes $1,000, and then having big balances at the back end. So one of the pricing strategies that a lot of people are putting in place that I'm working with is this idea of tiered discounts based upon deposits to help get a significant commitment from the patient now, but also to get a decent deposit so that you can have some cash flow to continue to come in, and then leveraging that against your marketing opportunities so that people actually know that's something you're offering, and that they can potentially take advantage of this opportunity as a patient to get great pricing.
Yeah. So, no, it's great feedback, and it's a balance, right? You've got really great doctors here trying to do something where they're used to that human engagement, and all of a sudden you've got to make them go virtual. They're going virtual in a market where consumers, may be under certain stress or certain unknowns, but you got to continue to run the business, and figuring out that balance is important. Where I'm starting to lean towards and looking at, and I'm curious about your opinion, is how does this essentially deep dive into virtual consultations for many people and many practices, how does it change things for them going forward as we exit this? So whether, we can all debate whether it's 2 months from now, a month from now, 3 months from now, but at the end of the day, the patient acquisition process is going to change dramatically because of this. And where do you see practices needing to think about strategically as they get their businesses under control between last week and this week? And how does their patient acquisition process change in the future as we all learn how to leverage the technology that's out there more, change the way we communicate with our customers, potentially need different responsibilities for our personnel or different personnel to handle that?
Well, I think one of the things, and some of my clients have already done this, some clients have not done it, is the idea of having some online consultation scheduling opportunity for patients through their websites, especially for virtuals, because when you look at the patient that wants a virtual consultation, not in this market per se, but in a normal market, those patients tend to convert at a pretty high percentage. When I look at those across the board at my clients, and obviously you've got a lot more data than I do, but my experience with those is that they tend to be pretty good consultations.
Yeah.
They're very busy people. Frequently they're either in town, but they're traveling a lot, or they're people who are drawn to the doctor for one reason or another, whether it was referral. Some of my clients have pretty significant social media gap followings, and those people will come from out of town. But usually when you're doing that, if you do the right things ahead of time, which is kind of part of my process with everybody, is when a lead comes in, do you do the right things with it to ensure by the time they get in front of the doctor, they really are a potential patient for conversion? If you do those things ahead of time, I think those virtual consults end up being high converting people. So I do think that this is something that, even though everyone's doing it right now because it's kind of being forced on them, the people that come out of this and take this and turn this into a normal part of their business, if it wasn't before, are going to have a leg up on the people who kind of go right back to doing things the way they were doing it before.
Yeah, and I think, look, I've done more face-to-face conference calls via video in the last week than I've done in my entire life, and it's the truth. It's a truth.
But don't you think that for the people who in the past have, and I've done that too, but for people in the past who have kind of been reticent or hesitant to do that as a patient or a potential customer, this is going to kind of break the ice for them, and it's going to become something that I think a lot more patients are going to be open to or asking for than they were prior to this situation.
Well, and to kind of conclude on that, that's exactly where I was going, is it's like social media. If doctors haven't gotten into social media to build a brand at this point, they sure as heck better start doing it now, obviously.
Yeah.
And
A little late to the party.
yeah, and secondly, this whole thing is going to change consumer behavior as a whole. So the percentage, if you had 100 consults last month that were done a certain way, the makeup of that 100 consults going forward based on consumer behavior is going to be completely different, because there's going to be a subset of the population that just simply is not going to want to go into medical offices. They're not going to want to be out at the grocery market as much as they were. Whatever it is, the amount of people that go out into the environment is going to dial back, and they're going to choose much more carefully where they want to go in person. And so you're going to have to adapt the business as an ongoing part of your business for this virtual consultation and telemedicine. It's going to be an amazing impact. And ultimately, I think it'll be for the better, right? It's going to allow better engagement with consumers, more on their time, but it's going to require different skill sets from the doctors, just like it requires different skill sets from us running a business and video conferencing for 40 hours in the last week.
Well, if you think of it from a physician perspective, and think about the amount of people and the amount of manpower that it takes to move a patient through a new consultation in your office. Front desk, greeted by either your nurse or your patient coordinator, roomed by somebody, stepping in, the doctor sees them initially for the H&P, steps out to do a post-op, somebody else steps in to tell them to get undressed. So it's a 45 minutes to an hour process that could involve 4 to 5 people. Now you take that same process and consolidate it down to a virtual. It takes 2 people, a patient coordinator and a doctor.
Yep.
And it also takes less time. Most of my physicians spend 45 minutes to an hour in an in-person consultation, and a virtual is about 30 minutes. So if this becomes a bigger part of the way you do business, you potentially have the opportunity to see more consultations in a clinic day, which obviously increases your conversion opportunities. And so it'll be interesting to see how that ties into how we market to these people over time. Yeah,
it changes everything.
Right? It just changes the game in terms of who you're marketing, how you're marketing to people, and the options you're giving them. I think, and I know some of your clients do this as well, but one of the things that needs to be done to make this easier is, in the past, a lot of physicians have done virtuals, but it's truly like, send your pictures in ahead of time, I'll get on the phone with you. The expectation for that is going to change to, I'm going to see you face-to-face as a physician. Creating portals on our websites where the patients can upload all their information ahead of time, put their H&Ps in there so that the doctors aren't trying to mess with all this stuff ahead of time, which is what most people have been doing, other than the people who had really already bought into the technology.
It's the same if you think about it, it's the same technology, almost to the extent, from a pure business standpoint. Why do you, when you go to a hotel today, are you able to check in without even having to talk to somebody, right? Because you're decreasing stress on the experience, you're decreasing that friction, you're allowing people to have accessibility right away versus having to wait in a line. Now, obviously, you can't take out the personal part of this in a virtual consultation for medical practices, but your whole point of stripping out inefficiencies in the process is, you'd be a fool not to take advantage of this in the future. But you're gonna require, yes, you may have a different cost structure. You're also gonna have a different set of skills that you need. And that ability to be able to communicate effectively in a virtual consultation, give somebody the comfort, give them the right education, is gonna require some different skill sets that we'll all get better at.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think it will also allow you to be more creative in your scheduling. So, I mean, you as a physician right now, whereas you see most of your consultations in clinic, you might say, okay, I'm going to take a half a day a week that's committed just to virtuals and schedule it in block time, which would allow you to use less staff during that time and also be able to save your overhead on staffing. So I think there's going to be a lot of pieces as we look at this moving forward that this is going to play into the way we run the entire business.
Yeah. All right, listen, Eric, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. I know this was on short notice, but given the environment, we've been talking about this for a long time, and this forced us to get out here and start doing it. And we think it's important to, we feel very grateful for relationships like we have with you, and the knowledge we can excuse me, the knowledge we can get out to all these different practices in such a trying time. And so we went ahead with it, and appreciate you playing offense with us. We'll talk to you
Well,
soon.
I'm glad you're doing it, because the conversation we're having today is going to be a completely different conversation a week to 2 weeks before we think the doors are going to fly back open, right?
Yep.
And then that's going to be a different conversation, 45 days after that. So our clients and everyone that we work with and try to assist, we want them to look at things not just today, but down the road. And these conversations, just like we talked about, they're very fluid. They change by the week right now.
Absolutely. All right, man. Take care. Appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
Jason. All right.